let's talk about the New Living Translation. I'm holding up the Schuyler Caxton edition, which I think is no longer in print, but I love this particular publication of the New Living Translation text. It's a single column, art gilt, goatskin leather, a dark green, 3 ribbon. I love the size of it. I love the feel of it. I love to read from it. Beautiful text. One of my favorite Bibles, without a doubt. And I'll mention to you why I specifically chose the color green in just a few moments. But let's talk about the translation itself. The New Living Translation was birthed out of the Tyndale Publishing Company when they were looking to do a project of updating and making more scholarly the popular and famous Living Bible that was written by Kenneth Taylor in the 1960s when he was doing family devotions with his children. They were having a hard time understanding the King James Bible. He was always having to try to explain the King James language and the difficult words to them, which was probably not a horrible thing, but he wanted to expedite the process, and so he switched to the RSV, which is a modern English Bible translation. They were still struggling to understand it as small children, and so he decided he would write out every night, read the King James, I don't know if he's reading King James or the RSV, but he would put it into his own words in a way that he thought they might be able to comprehend and understand, the result of which was the Living Bible that was published by Tyndale in, I think, 1971, 72, somewhere in that time frame. This is a hardback copy. This is pretty much what I remember people carrying in the 1970s. I can actually remember, I don't think I remember seeing it in the 70s. I remember seeing it in the 1980s. There were several people that were reading the Living Bible. It was very popular among evangelical Christians because it spoke so much in our common language. Now, we do not consider, in terms of scholarship and in terms of official, we do not consider the Living Bible to be a translation. We consider it to be a paraphrase. Because of that, in the mid to late 80s, Tyndale said, well, why don't we take this paraphrase, one man's translation, into his own words, and let's update it with biblical Hebrew and Greek scholars to be a translation. They ended up going back to the original languages and comparing his work to the original languages, and they made several changes to where it really was a new translation altogether. And it was published in 1996. And when it came out, if you compared it with the Living Bible, you would see there was a source here, in some cases, same wording. And so they relied heavily on his wording when it was appropriate and when they felt like he was nailing it with the original languages. It was updated in 2004, 2007, 2013, and 2015 as well. And you can still see traces of Kenneth Taylor's influence in his language in the now updated several times New Living Translation. Over 90 scholars together produced the New Living Translation. It speaks our language today. In fact, I would say this: no other major popular English translation is more effective at sounding the way we speak today, your average American speaking English, than the New Living Translation. Because of that, it is wildly popular among young people and among those who want to hear the Bible in the way we talk. And so that's the great thing about it. Here's what I especially love about reading the New Living Translation, which, by the way, I have read it from cover to cover, and I found that I loved it especially in the narrative portions, in the storytelling throughout the Old Testament, like through the Chronicles and the Kings and all that. I love the New Living Translation because it just flows so freely as I read it. Same with some of the parables and things like that. But let me speak briefly to the weaknesses of the New Living Translation. Sometimes you lose the interpretive choice. When you're reading the New Living Translation, especially in the doctrinal sections, especially in like Paul's letters and Romans and things like that, because the New Living Translation is a dynamic translation that's thought for thought, what happens, and this is the danger of thought for thought translations, is the translator makes an interpretive choice for the way that they phrase the wording, and instead of leaving it open to you to make the choice. A literal translation, you're more likely to get what was coming from the original language, and it could be interpreted two different ways. That could mean this or that could mean that. But the moment you make it more like the way we talk today, oftentimes you're making an interpretive choice and you're choosing one of those two options of how it could be said or interpreted. Another weakness of New Living Translation is oftentimes when they are seeking to talk the way we talk today, they will leave a metaphor behind, a concrete metaphor, instead giving the meaning of that metaphor. And when you lose the metaphor, sometimes you lose part of the imagery that God is wanting you to have in your mind in communicating that truth. God put the metaphors in there. I like to keep the metaphors. Sometimes in seeking to give you the meaning, you lose the metaphor, you lose the richness. So the New Living Translation, I highly recommend for young children, for young people, for new believers, for people who speak English as a second or third language. Now, I mentioned something about the color. The reason why I got my Schuyler Caxton in green is because of this popular hardback copy of the Living Bible as its source and history is in this dark green. So I thought it was only appropriate that I get my premium Bible in dark green as well, as a way of honoring Kenneth Taylor and what he did to help make the scriptures and the truth of the scriptures more accessible to so many people who struggle with understanding the literal versions.